How does this ever work? All right. I suppose you don't want me touching your mic while I'm talking, do you? All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming. A new lack of sunshine on state government in Iowa marks a dark day for this state. Last year, despite bipartisan opposition, the governor signed the most pro-corruption bill in Iowa history, allowing state agencies to hide documents from the auditor's office and the truth from you, taxpayers. Today, we are issuing the first report telling the public that the truth remains hidden from them as a result of that law. Government corruption and secrecy are growing in the state of Iowa. Government corruption and secrecy will grow further if SF 2311 passes this year. It is no coincidence that yesterday, the same day that Republican insiders that authored last year's pro-corruption bill advanced a new bill, again, despite bipartisan opposition, to further destroy anti-corruption checks and balances. It would replace the state auditor chosen by the people of the state of Iowa with one insiders will handpick, with no bidding requirement and no means for independent oversight of their audits. These insiders want a state auditor who is a lapdog, not a watchdog. Anyone can see it. They are so desperate to explain away the obvious purpose of this new legislation that they held up Illinois as an example for government accountability. Illinois, where 4 of their last 10 governors have gone to prison. Illinois, where even a study funded by the state of Illinois universities found that they were second in the country for public corruption. And the author of this bill, in looking for excuses for what he knows will increase corruption and what he knows will decrease checks and balances, thinks we should copy Illinois. It makes you wonder if some insiders actually want to increase corruption in order to line their own pockets at the expense of taxpayers. This bill's author also claimed as an excuse for this pro-corruption bill this year that it'll make things more efficient. This year our office issued the act for on time, and we will issue the single audit on time. The year that he wants to tell you about that we were late, we wrote letters to the Reynolds administration warning them that we cannot audit what we have not been provided. We had to do this for 2 years. He wants to blame us for the failure of this administration to provide us the documents that we need to conduct our audit. Now, are there pressures in the auditing industry? Absolutely. There's a shortage of accountants and auditors nationwide. You've probably heard me talk about it before. Anyone who's concerned or cares about actual solutions for this could support our bill that makes tax-free the work that auditors do on public sector engagements. Or they could ask the Iowa Society of CPAs what else would help with solving that problem. Again, an excuse for this bill with no basis in facts. In addition, this new pro-corruption bill would use a system similar to New Mexico, despite the fact that every other state in the country has moved away from a department-by-department audit. Now, am I 100% certain that no other state does what New Mexico does? I'm not. I just know that they are among the last, and I know that other states have moved away from this approach, including Michigan. Now, why am I not sure? Because we had no notice that the author of this bill wanted to advance any other bills about the state auditor's office this year. Maybe if he had come to us and asked, are these good ideas? We could have dug up some facts. We would know already, before he proposed and advanced the bill, whether or not New Mexico is literally the only other state that does this, or maybe if there's a couple of other stragglers that are also moving away from it. But we certainly could have established for him that that system doesn't work. Here's the reasons why. It's the same reasons that Marlis Gaston, our former deputy of our financial audit division who worked under 4 state auditors, told him yesterday at the subcommittee meeting. So maybe if he had spoken to us in advance, we could have let him know about some of these issues. And maybe that would have helped write a bill that would actually be good for taxpayers. But maybe that's not his focus here. This bill and the process that led us here is exactly why so many of us, myself included, hate politics. So please, take the word of the author of this bill. It will bring us an Illinois-style anti-corruption system, one of the most corrupt states in the entire country. So let me make it clear regarding today's report on the Board of Parole, where we can't say whether or not the state government is following its own laws. With this bill, they want to find an auditor who won't even dare ask the question in the first place. The Board of Parole report that we issued today is pretty straightforward. We had a whistleblower come to us, as we often do, saying, hey, the Board of Parole, they're not following the rules. They're not following the law that governs how they're supposed to conduct themselves. They're not doing this the way the law lays it out. And so, in the course of our audit, we reached out to the Board of Parole. And we let them know that we had some concerns about this issue, and they asserted to us, it's okay, we figured that out, we noticed it, and we fixed it internally. And we said, oh great, that's wonderful. And then because we're the auditor's office, we said, go ahead and send us over the documents so that we can verify what you're telling us is true. It would have been a wonderful opportunity for us to back up the Board of Parole. If in fact they had noticed this on their own and had addressed the issue on their own, they could have had the independent state auditor's office issue a report stating, hey, actually, the Board of Parole had made this mistake, but they have cleaned it up on their own, good for them. Instead, they refused to provide the documentation to us. In their reasoning, they stated that, they cited SF 478, the new bill from last year. Is it applicable here? Don't think so. But they have the capacity to cite it, and they wouldn't provide us the documentation. They also claimed that these records were an aspect of litigation because there's an individual who has sued the state over these same practices. We had asked for these records long before the suit was filed. That was not a reason to not give them to us at the time that we made the request. So can we tell you that the Board of Parole fixed this problem on their own? We can't. Can we tell you that they fixed the problem at all? We can't. No one in the state knows other than a bunch of government insiders because of the bill that this building passed and the governor signed last year. I'm happy to take questions.
With their refusal to provide the documents, I know that the law from last year had that like 3-member board that could decide issues like that. Did you move forward with that, or what's going on with that?
No.
And why?
Not sure that there would be a point. That panel would be one person from our office, one person from the Board of Parole, which works at the pleasure of the governor, and the third person chosen by the governor.
So
I like efficiency in government. I'm not here to clown around and waste people's time. Okay.
So you would never plan to ask for the board in the future?
Can't say that. We'll take them as they come. I want to emphasize this, though, right? Look at what a small issue this is. We deal with audits that range from tens of thousands to millions of dollars at stake. This isn't even a question about where money went. It's just a question of whether or not the state was following its own laws. And yet, despite what you would think would be the relatively small stakes for an issue like that, they still don't want to provide the records. What does anybody think they are going to do when there is real money at stake?
Do you know how many state agencies are currently using CPAs for audits?
They presently can't do that.
So also like using the CPAs for audits could be produce more independent audits than the state auditing. What's your response to that?
Let me explain why all of the reasons for advancing that bill make no sense. We've already covered some of them, right? It would make us more like Illinois. That is literally the comment from the author. Raise your hand if you think you can find an Iowan that wants to copy Illinois' system for public corruption. I don't. It would make it less timely because of the fact that if you look at the way the system works, that department by department system, again, New Mexico is doing that and almost nobody else, right? But let's go further into this, right? The claim has been made that this would make it just so that they can choose like local governments do, right? You all probably heard, well, the city of Des Moines, they choose a private firm to do their audit. Every single audit that is done in the state of Iowa of a city or a county or a school district or any other local government entity, right, has oversight. The state auditor's office can look at the work papers of the firm that conducts a private sector audit for a local government entity, and we can determine whether or not that audit was a good audit. We can determine whether or not that audit was compliant. We can determine whether or not that audit actually addressed allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse. In addition to that, maybe back up, this bill wouldn't give us that capacity for anyone auditing the state. They would just be able to hire whoever they want. They would conduct that audit, and that audit would then, we could review it in the sense that we could read it, but that would be it. Here's the other piece of that. With any local government entity, if we get a request from a public employee of that entity, or an elected official of that entity, or if we get a petition with 100 signatures on it from members of the public, we can conduct a special investigation, right? So we still have the capacity at the local level to make sure that when there are allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse, that they are being addressed. This bill, surprise, surprise, wouldn't let us do that at the state level, right? And let's go back to this. I think the question was, would it make the audits more independent? What is more independent than someone who owes their election to the people and the taxpayers of the state of Iowa? More independent to hire somebody? More independent to have the governor, without being required to bid out the audit, be able to hire whoever they want, whose ability to continue doing that work for another year depends on whether or not they have pleased their master? There's no factual basis for the idea that somehow that bill would make anything more independent.
Can I follow on that?
Yes.
So you're saying that if this bill goes through, the whatever state office it is, the DNR hires a CPA firm to do an audit of them. If that report comes to your office, something looks fishy, you literally have no course of action. You couldn't look
Correct.
at that and say, we should probably just conduct our own audit of the DNR office?
We can ask, and who do we ask? The DNR. And what does the DNR do? Well, thanks. We'll have someone look into that.
Just want to make sure that's
Yeah. So again, one of the most fundamental aspects of auditing is independence, right? And when you take the entity that's being audited and put them in charge of the auditor, put them in charge of the auditor in terms of what they can look at, like they did last year, or like this bill, you are undermining independence. What is the purpose of an audit if you don't have independence? Everybody in the state of Iowa understands that if an auditor comes knocking, it's not going to be a fun experience, right? That they get to look at everything. No one in the state of Iowa would be worried about someone auditing them if they could decide who it was that was going to audit them and then decide what they were going to look at. What's the point? Lori.
Can you elaborate? First of all, I just want to make sure I understood what you said earlier. Is the annual comprehensive financial report already completed for the last fiscal year?
Yes,
Okay.
we issued it at the end of December.
Okay. And Marlis Gaston raised this at the subcommittee, but I wonder if you can explain as well. Would the state auditor still be responsible, like as part of the single audit, for producing reports about all of the different agencies, even if those agencies hired an outside auditor? And
Yeah.
how would that actually work?
So that is sort of the New Mexico system that we're talking about. The fact that they are one of the only states in the country that actually does it that way still. Michigan in 2011 issued a feasibility report looking at whether or not they should move away from that, and in fact decided to move away from that. It's a bad idea, it's inefficient, it's wasteful. But let me go back to this. you're asking an interesting question. Maybe if the guy who wants to change the way the auditor's office worked would ask the people who currently sit in it, whether it was me or somebody who's over in the Hoover building, about how it works and whether or not this was a good idea, we could have actually put some thought into whether or not it works as a system for taxpayers. But again, I don't think that's the purpose of SF23 or SF2311. The purpose of SF2311 is not to create a better system for taxpayers. It's to undermine an independently elected official of the state of Iowa and all of the people who work in this office for taxpayers, and it's to increase corruption in the state of Iowa.
So under the bill, would you be able to provide at the end of December the annual report?
Don't know.
If you don't provide the annual report, what are the financial repercussions for bond?
The state has to get audited. Federal funds have to get audited every single year. If you don't issue timely, you can have problems. What scares me the most about federal funding and the state's bond rating definitely is the bill that they already made law last year, where you can just wholesale say, we're not going to give you that today, right? I mean, that's fundamentally why we're here today, because that report came over from the Hoover building this week, and they said, okay, this is ready to issue, right? And so we saw that happen. We saw them hide documentation on something that's just such small ball, right? So would we be able to do it then? Would it affect the state's bond rating? Hypothetically, it could. Again, I think states have moved away from this kind of system that they're proposing because it's inefficient. I know that about half the states issued late in the same year that the author of this bill wants to point out, oh, they were late, so we need to have more people be available to do this.
Wasn't the tardiness due to workday?
Do we have our other letter? Okay. We have been in consistent correspondence with the Reynolds administration for years about their specific failure to provide us the documents that we need to do our job. Let me read you a couple of selections from the letter that we wrote March 4th, 2022. I am requesting that you devote additional resources towards completion of the GAP team's work in order to avoid adverse financial consequences for the state. We have only received a small portion of what we need to perform our work. It cites our continued correspondence going back over a great deal of time. It points out, let's see here, that the deadlines for getting us the documents that we needed were consistently missed and missed and missed and missed. We even, at the auditor's office, because we care, all of us, all roughly 100 of us, about doing the work for taxpayers of the state of Iowa, we even took the initiative to reach out to someone who had recently retired from the GAP team. The GAP team are the people who work on the administrative side, who prepare the documentation that is necessary for us to audit, right? I know auditing is not everybody's cup of tea. It's not the area of great interest. The financial documents have to be prepared by the auditee to then be audited by the auditor. The GAP team are the people who do that. They had a great amount of turnover, right? And some of that is inevitable. Yes, Workday was an issue related to that because there was a great deal of change and a lot of people decided, I don't really want to have to learn an entirely new system. I'm just going to take my IPERS and ride off into the sunset. We reached out to one of those people, Marilyn Hansen, and we asked. We even told her, we took the initiative to do this. Things are moving really slowly. They have missed deadline after deadline. Would you be willing to come back on a part-time basis and just help them get things in order? Right? And so because we did that, Marilyn did come back and did help out. Why? We could have sat on our butts. If this was politics, we could have sat on our butts. And we could have said, look at how late they are. That's pathetic. And we could have laid all the blame on them. Instead, you haven't really heard this story because we were actually trying to get it done on time because that's what we're supposed to do for the state of Iowa. We took the initiative to reach out to folks. We asked them to come back and help.
One back on 2311, when the counties, cities, schools hire out these private CPAs, you see all those reports. How often do you, or have you seen examples of times where the auditor's office needs to step in? Like how common is that?
Well, I mean, we typically issue 24 special investigations a year, right? Special investigations at their heart are being issued because an audit didn't pick something up. Yeah.
It's the estimation that if 2311 passes, it would cost taxpayers an additional $5 million.
How could I forget? Yes. Here's why. CPA private firm billing rates are 30 to 60% higher than what the state auditor's office charges the state. We bill, it's either $93 or $94 an hour. There are CPA firms in the state of Iowa that bill hundreds of dollars an hour. And going back to timeliness, it's not a question of whether or not you're in the public sector or the private sector. The CPA firm that's auditing us now is 2 years late with the report.
Okay, I'm sorry, how would your office go about compiling the annual comprehensive financial report and the single audit if you had various state agencies or units being audited by private firms?
Yeah, it would be a mess, and it would be inefficient, right? I mean, if you have multiple engagements, this is about economies of scale, right? If you have one person handling the whole thing, you're in a better place. If you have this piece by piece, piecemeal thing, it's going to be a mess. How would we do that? Don't know. Haven't had to do it. Wouldn't have many other states to look to for an example because everyone else is deciding not to do it. Anybody else got anything? All right. Thanks. Do we have copies of our correspondence for everybody?
We will put it in a newspaper.
We're gonna put it in an email.
Okay.
Talking about